audio.
There's a reason why you fell. There's a reason why you didn't succeed. You have to stop making the excuse. Excuses just hold us back.
Hey y'all, I'm Ryan Devlin, and welcome back to The Struggle. I'm so psyched that you're here. Hope you're having an awesome day. And oh, is it a good day to be tuning into The Struggle over here. We've got Alex Puccio on the show, and I have been hunting down Alex like the last Pokemon that she has been in my collection of Alexes. We got Magos, we got Honnold, we got Johnson, we now have Puccio. Let's go. And it was worth the wait, let me tell you, because this conversation is incredibly insightful and stoked. Alex is one of the most successful female boulderers. Strike that. She's one of the most successful boulderers of all time. I'll just try to tick off a few of the things that she's done here. You already know all of this probably. She's won 11 national bouldering championships. She's won the World Cups twice. She's been on the podium more times than any of us could count. And then when she shifted her sights from plastic to outdoors, she just took off like a rocket ship out there. And we talk a lot about this in the conversation. She sent over 248 A's. So that's V11s and higher. 39 of those V13s and 8 or maybe more now V14s. She's an absolute force in competition, outside on blocks, and also as a coach. She brings all of that insight to this conversation here today. I learned so much. And she's pregnant, which added a whole other layer to the perspective in the conversation that we have here. She is one of the most fierce competitors I think I've ever talked to. She's developed the reputation of being the comeback queen after having some pretty heinous injuries, like career-ending injuries at the time, what she thought would be career-ending injuries, and then coming back even stronger. This conversation from training all the way through to mental game is just absolute banger, and I'm so psyched you're here for it. Now, you can probably hear in my voice that I'm fighting a little bit of a cold. Here we are. The fall is approaching. I had such a blissfully healthy summer. That's what happens when the kids aren't in school. But now the little petri dishes are back, and I'm fighting my first cold. So I'm going to save my voice and shorten up this intro here and just get into this banger interview with Alex. But one thing that I will say, or two things, actually. One, if you would like a deep dive into my update of my training and nutrition tactics, mental game, the whole thing, I'm releasing now a plog. That's a podcast blog. I think it's a word. I also think it's not a word. Either way, that's what I'm calling it. And that's available for patrons and Apple subscribers. You can get a free trial if you just want to dip into that and check out some of the pro clinics that I've had out recently. Really good stuff out there. And so anyway, I go into some detail on what I've been working on in that plog, definitely a word. And also the other thing that I want to shout out here is that ROCKTOBERFEST at the Red River Gorge is just right around the corner. October 9th through 12th, I'm going to be hosting a live interview and podcast with Babsi and Jacopo at Miguel's on Wednesday, October 9th. I'm so psyched for that. And then on Friday, October 11th, the big night over at Land of the Arches, I'm going to be premiering a film that I did with Alex Honnold. I'm so proud of it. And I just cannot wait for everybody to see it. So look, if you can make it out to the Red for ROCKTOBERFEST, please grab a ticket to my Wednesday night kickoff and say hi to me there. We're going to be doing a big giveaway with all sorts of amazing swag, from shoes to ropes to gear. It's all going to be at Miguel's on that Wednesday night. And then on the Friday, the 11th, doing the film. Find me. I'll buy you a beer or give you a high five or maybe beg you to come catch me on my project out at the dark side. I would love to see you there. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to this show. It's a lot of work. I really am grateful that you're here and that you're supporting, and I hope you're getting a lot out of these conversations like this one that we are going to dive into right now with Alex Puccio.
I think 27 weeks is start of your third trimester. And I thought that was like more than a week from now. Actually, I think Sunday is 27 weeks. So I think we're entering our third trimester.
Third trimester, still climbing V8, V9 on the kilter, I feel like I saw today.
Yeah, I think I'm always dabbing because Robin's there for support. And once in a while, I'm like, hey, can you give me just like a few pounds off, please? But yeah, he doesn't get any breaks. He doesn't get a rest period. He just gets, he gets like, yeah, maybe he's getting fitter from it or he's getting more injured. I don't know.
Well, I again love seeing the journey. Thanks for taking us all along for the ride. And for me, where I have 2 kids now, I'm beyond the pregnancy years, but it's bringing back some fond and challenging memories. So I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that in this.
Yes.
Before we, kind of dive in earnest, do you have any questions or any thoughts or anything? I mean, you're such a pro at this point in time, but anything you want to talk about or not talk about?
Like you said earlier, I'm like a pretty open person. So usually I've never had anything that I'm like, no, I can't talk about that. But if there is, I'll just kindly say, but yeah, I like to be an open book, and and I feel like I connect with people that way. And I've always been like that, even before being a professional athlete. It's just part of who I am, I guess.
Oh, that's nice. Well, cool. This is a good platform for it. We'll just have a conversation. We'll see where it goes. I've had a lot of your friends on the show. Recently, Kai was on, Davis, Dr. Klein, of course.
Yeah.
I've had Nina Williams on. I've been circling you for a couple of years. You're like the final Pokemon Alex that I needed to collect. I've got Honnold, I've got Magos, I've got Johnson, and now Puccio.
I should have held out a little bit longer, maybe. I don't know. If I'm that rare. No, I'm just like, I'm so like, it's not that I don't like doing these. I'm actually very outgoing and sociable, and I like to talk, and it's hard to shut me up, probably more than to get me to talk. I'm just like bad with some things for some reason, or just scheduling things in. I don't know, but I'm excited to be here. So, but thank you for being persistent.
Yeah, of course. All it took was for you to get pregnant so that you were a little bit more sedentary. Sedentary is not the right word. You were like out for a 3-mile run today. I don't know what it is. You're just more open to be having a conversation. Well, I'm really psyched. I really appreciate the time. You've been a climbing hero of mine and so many listeners for many years now. And this is just going to be rich territory. Let's dive in. Let's just start where we usually start here at the struggle, which is with struggle and kind of this elective struggle that we like to put on ourselves as climbers. And you've got some decades now to be able to look back on your career. And I'm curious, just as you explore your climbing life through this lens of struggle, what's your relationship with struggle?
Wow. I've had a lot of struggles in my career. And I think I didn't really struggle much until I was probably mid-20s. And then I think at one point it became like, I don't want to say famous, more infamous of like being, called the comeback queen. Starting in my mid-20s with like a first ACL reconstruction. And then I think it was like the year later, I had a spinal fusion in my neck. And then a couple of years after that, my second ACL reconstruction. And then I've had like maybe 3 or 4 maybe like more than that. I had quite a few surgeries, but some of them are minor, so I don't really count them. But yeah, I don't know why. I think some people just are luckier than others of not getting injured. Some people don't push themselves as hard as others. Some people are better at listening to their bodies. I feel like I'm quite good at listening to my body, but then, yeah, it's a balance. So I've definitely had a lot of, I guess, times where I had to come back from something, but it's always made me stronger physically, mentally. It's made me appreciate what I get to do in life and not take it for granted. So I don't see those things as, yes, it may be a struggle in the moment, but I've definitely had a lot of learning, and it's made me appreciate so many more things about the sport and the life that I get to live.
Did you see that experience, that outlook on struggle and how you handle, in particular, injuries evolve? Was it different after your first ACL than your second, or a shoulder injury, or, some of the more minor, you've been injured quite a bit when like you don't even count some surgeries, so how did your relationship with struggle kind of evolve or change over the past 20 years of the career?
Yeah. So my first ACL, I remember it was Vail World Cup. I was in isolation, and it was like me on a store, I think Petra, and maybe a couple others, like making up some dynos. And the isolation area was like there's like an athletic club. It wasn't like the padding wasn't very good. It was like a really old gym. So not the best warm-up zone, but we're making up dynos. And I remember catching these 2 jugs, like going from a vertical wall to like a roof. And I caught the 2 jugs. I was swinging out, wasn't very high off the ground, but caught them. My legs swung out. And as I was swinging back in, my hand slipped off, and I was like in the splits of my legs. And so I fell in a very awkward position close to the ground, and it just caught the inside of my left foot, and my knee just like my whole bottom part of my leg just like went outwards. And I felt everything tear. I heard it tear. The pain was instant. I just remember in that moment, I was like on the ground, screaming, crying. And I think I was even saying aloud, like, my career's over. Like, what did I do? Like, I thought that was the end. And I was about, I think, 24, 25. Yeah. And I was the fittest I've ever been in my life. I felt great. And I literally thought my career was over. Like, I knew instantly that it was gone. Like, it was like my knee, it was surgery, even though I've never had anything like that happen before. But the feeling, it swelled instantly. At the time, I didn't think I had health insurance as well. So I denied the ambulance. My mom, yeah, I remember being like, I know you're not allowed to have phones in isolation at a World Cup. So I was like, can I call my mom? Like, I mean, I'm in pain, and there's all the physios from all the other teams, like on top of me, like pinning me down, like, don't move. And then like the paramedics got there, like, yes, you can call your mom. Here's a phone. And my boyfriend, Joel, at the time, him and my mom like rushed over. They came and got me. My mom got lost getting to the hospital, which is a mile down the street in Vale. It wasn't very far.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so we finally got there. I mean, I was in the back seat. I think Joel was holding my leg. My mom freaking out. And I just remember yelling to her, give me the phone. They're literally, you just go down like it's one street. It's less than a mile away. So we get there, and I think I go into the ER, they do the Lachman test, and they're like, yeah, the ACL's gone. I was like, can you check the other side? Can you show me again? Like, cause it's not like a massive, like if you don't know what you're looking for, like it's hard to tell.
Right.
But it's funny because pain subsided, like, and it was the worst pain I've ever been in. And it subsided like probably about an hour after. I'm like, am I fine? And my knee's huge. And they're like, no. No, it's gone. Like, you're going to need surgery. So I went to like the PT downstairs at the hospital. They fitted me in a brace. And I remember I met Zach DiCristino, which is actually the USA team physio now. And this is before he was the USA team physio. So I think that relationship with him, like, he was a huge role in my recovery the whole time through that ACL. But basically, I stayed at the competition and I watched the whole comp because I didn't want to go home. I was going to be sad if I was at home, so I'd just rather be there. Yeah. And yeah, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me at that point. And I got stronger than I've ever been in my life, like physically, actually, as well, even 6 months later.
Holy smokes. This is when you were 24, right?
I think 24 or 25. So it kind of blurs together. It's a long time ago.
That's
10
about
years ago.
10 years ago? Yeah, okay. And so then, since then, you've obviously progressed and excelled in the sport, both on plastic and on rock, and had other injuries. And so kind of coming out the other side of that, realizing that you could get stronger, when subsequent injuries came, was it a similar, my career is over reaction like you've had, or did you just have a little bit more perspective considering this first one and how you recovered from it?
Definitely way more perspective. Like, every injury after that was more like annoying rather than being like, okay, my career's over. I never really thought my career's over again after that. I mean, because like I had such a great outcome with the first ACL. Like, I think I did my first V12 6 weeks after, like first V12 outside 6 weeks after my ACL. Oh, wow. I did my first like V13 3 months after outside. Like I was like in this no fall zone. So, I mean, I didn't feel like I was ever at risk. I knew if I fell, like, there is no falling. Like, I channeled my inner like Alex Honnold, and I was like, okay, like, he's free soloing, he can't fall. My mind, obviously the consequences aren't the same, but like, I definitely don't want to do another, like, I just had this ACL reconstruction. I don't want to mess it up. So again, like, my relationship at the time, Joel, he was an amazing support system through that, and would like spot me like a hero. And I never did like I remember a couple of times I bailed off a top out, like climbed down like a V2 after doing a V13 because I was scared there I could slip. And then I remember being like angry with myself. There's this climb called Irreversible. I think it was about 3 or 4 months after ACL reconstruction, no fall zone. The hard part's like a traverse close to the ground. And then you do like a V1 or V2, mess up the hands. I down climbed, got mad. And then 15 minutes later, I went again from the beginning and sent it. So basically, like, this mindset, like, and I did nationals, bouldering nationals, because I wanted to do the next World Cup season. I had to do nationals. And I did nationals 6 months and like 1 week after my ACL reconstruction.
Wow.
So I started falling literally the week before the competition. So it was like all really quickly, but I just knew that like after having that experience, like it wasn't easy by any means, but it made me so motivated and I became stronger than I've ever been, that every other injury, like when it happened again, I was like, okay, well, here we go. Like I know what to do. I know it's going to suck and I know it's going to feel like, but I know I can do it.
Oh man, I think what I need to do is maybe just like blow out my knee and I'm going to go send my project 6 months later.
Don't recommend it. Don't recommend it. It's not fun. But if you have to, it's like there's always like a light at the end of the tunnel, and just how it's like you frame your mindset. I feel like when I have a big injury, it's like the universe putting me down or testing me. And I'm such a stubborn person. It can be good, obviously, sometimes. It can also be bad. That I'm just like, no, I want to show you, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to overcome it. And it's honestly made me more motivated than I've ever been in my life. So when something or someone is telling you no, I want to prove them or that thing wrong. And I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to show you and I'm going to exceed my expectations or your expectations.
Hell yeah. That's such a competitor's mindset and really a through line with a lot of the athletes that I've, had the pleasure of talking with on this show is that, facing struggle, facing adversity, facing a setback, and just like relishing in the opportunity to prove that thing wrong or the universe wrong, whatever it is. I'm excited to dive more into a lot of this actually as we get down into the mental game chapter. And then we had some questions come in from listeners kind of around this as well. So I'm going to put a pin in some of this and we'll loop back to it. First, I want to kind of talk about training for a little bit. Let's geek out, dive into training. You're, a incredibly accomplished competitive climber, outdoor climber, and coach, an elite coach as well. And so I think you bring a really unique perspective to this training chapter that we're going to dive into, but let's enter it where we always do, which is struggle. And where has training been a struggle for you, Alex, or maybe even currently, where is it a struggle for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest parts with training and just being in the sport for so long and being a professional athlete for so long, like I think since my like late 20s, like maybe even like 29, 30 years old, like I've struggled more mentally of wanting to put the same amount of effort and time in to training, just because I think it's, sometimes it's really hard to pinpoint it and it can make you go crazy, like pinpoint why. But I think it's like just the psych, like you're just, what am I training for? What am I doing? And I think ever since like late 20s to 30, like I felt the feeling of like wanting to become like a mom at some point and having a kid, and like just life kind of adds up, right? And I think for me, the mental struggles are harder than the physical ones. And if you're just like, I find times if I'm just like training and making myself do it, like it doesn't always have to be fun, but like if I'm making myself do it like day in, day out, and I don't feel at least like some amount of appreciation for it or fun or whatever you want to call it, like mentally breaks you down a bit. So I met Robin and my husband out in 2018 in the fall, and then we got married during COVID 2020. So everything like kind of progressed quite quickly with us, which was awesome. And I remember like, I think it was sometime in 2020, 2021, we're climbing outside and I fell on the lip of this like really hard V14, like my hand on the lip. And then it was in Rocky Mountain National Park. Haven't done it yet, but I kept on trying it and I put like maybe 15 sessions in, something like one of my longest standing projects. And it's actually notorious, like a really hard one, doesn't get done very often. And I remember one day it was just him and I was like sitting on top of the boulder and no one else is around. And I just like start crying. And he's like, I think he's like, he can hear me cry, and he comes around the corner and he's like, what's wrong? I'm like, why can't you have the baby? I mean, we are not even like, we're 2024 now. And it's
right.
Like, I'm sitting there thinking like, I know these things that I want and I'm in my like, I'm 30s. It's like, you just keep on thinking about life like this, a little bit of a crisis and what's meaningful to you. What do you want? Like, what do you want your future to look like? I think when I was younger, I thought 30 is this like magical age of like, you're an adult, like you should have all of your shit together. And what does that look like? And you get to 30 and you're like, I don't own a home. I'm not starting a family. Like I just got married. Like, and not that any of that's bad or we should. It's just maybe what society has put on us from like a young age, especially when I was like in my, teen years. And so I think like that plus training, plus I'm not doing competitions anymore, but I haven't said I'm retired. It just kind of all compiled. And it took me a few years to get back into wanting like what's meaningful to me and the struggle of like, do I want to keep training or what am I training for? I know I always want to like climb harder and climb, the next level for me, but kind of, I guess, reframing my mind and seeing what that looks like and finding the passion for a project. Like I can't just go out and I've never been a person to be like, okay, like I want to climb V15, but I'm not going to find one that just suits me and not have this like desire for the climb just because I wouldn't do it just for the number. Like I want to climb V15 one day. Like that's still a goal for sure. And then V16 would be amazing. Like I have all these goals that are number related, but I have to find something that drives me. Like the climb has to speak to me as well. But I think so far in pregnancy, I've had this new desire and motivation again, almost like the first injury that I had with my knee. It's like, what can I do? I'm so excited. And I feel like when you have a baby, like time's more precious. I'm not there yet. I don't have the kid is still in me. So I think when time is more precious, like you're more like, okay, I have 2 hours to train or, I have this like, and it's not the only thing you're fixated on. And climbing is not who I am. It's a part of me. So I think like I'm going to have a better perspective. And I already feel like I'm starting to have a better perspective on my life, my career and climbing, training, everything.
Having that busy schedule, at least for me, with a couple of kids and a couple of jobs and a podcast and all of this, it really does force some focus and potency of every minute that we have in the day. And I kind of personally, I like to geek out over training, maybe because I'm busy, or maybe it's just like I'm kind of that type A personality. And it does seem like a lot of the climbers I talk to and just climbers in general tend to, not exclusively, but tend to fall into kind of one of maybe two camps here, if I'm going to just generalize. And one would be that like really psyched, very organized, I'm going to plan out all my training and I've got my notebooks and my apps and I'm, this is geeking out over numbers and metrics. And then maybe the other bucket is like, hey, I'm just going to climb. I'm going to try and get the stimulus that I need by climbing different things, but like, I just want to climb all the time. I'm not going to think about putting too much organization to this. And so if you had to put yourself in one of those camps, or if there's more nuance, happy to dig into it, but where would you fall?
It's funny. I don't know if I'm somewhere in between. Honestly, like I'm looking over on my right and I have like about 10 journals. I like to write everything down and they all are like training journals from the years past. So I've always like written things down, what I'm going to do. And I think that's the thing. Like I've always been like that. And then I think you just get burnt out of that at some point. Cause I remember at one, like maybe in my like late 20s, I would, okay, here's a new journal. But then I would like miss like some weeks or I'm just like kind of tired of doing the same thing over and over and over. So it's funny because I am that like between, I know Robin and I, like I'm the organizer. I plan everything. Like to my left, I have a dry erase board of a calendar and I write everything down. I have lists everywhere in the house. So I am like, I guess kind of that type A personality. I've definitely met more people that are like more type A than me. I think I'm type A with a really big spontaneous side.
I'm curious kind of before we wrap up the training chapter here, what your training life and climbing balance kind of looks like. Maybe you could just like talk me through what a week, like maybe a typical week right now might look like for you. How often are you getting outside versus in the gym, a board versus, weight training or cardio? What is the balance between like kind of quote unquote just climbing versus specific training protocols that you're doing?
So I did write myself a training program in the beginning of pregnancy. That went out the window quite quickly, to be honest.
Yeah.
I had an idea, but like quickly realized that idea wasn't going to work. I do feel like, and I feel guilt. So I'll say one, I feel guilty or anxious if I'm like, if there's a day where I sit and do nothing, like if I'm just on the couch and I'm like, not that I'm like, my body needs rest. I'm more just like kind of lazy. And I'm just sitting there and I have to remind myself I am growing a human. So like right now, my training is like, we try to climb one day on, one day off. And I find the hardest part, like I feel everything I'm doing is safe for the baby. I feel like the one thing that could be at risk is from the relaxin hormone is like my own like ligaments and tendons, like my shoulders or fingers or elbows or knees, my core. And I'm really intentional of like not trying to injure a part of my body, knock on wood, during this time through pregnancy, because I want my postpartum journey to be, as good as it possibly can. Like you don't know it's exactly going to happen, but you try to like line things up so you have the best chances. So I'm trying to just like coming back from an injury, and I've always viewed pregnancy before I got pregnant as like an elective injury. And I like, maybe not the
like
best. And it's because and I think my injuries have helped me prepare for pregnancy to some capacity. Of when I was injured, like say you have a knee surgery and it's like, they'll say technically 9 months on average, so you're fully recovered. It's like you can still train. I was training the week after, like I was hangboarding, I was campusing and everything like week after and progressing, but like
right.
that, like, but your training has to look different. And it's kind of similar to pregnancy so far with me, where it's like, it's a very different feeling, a different type of what you can and can't do, but it's still the same thing where you can still train. It just looks a bit different. So I would say on average, where I'm doing like one day on, one day off of climbing, mostly in the gym. We haven't been going outside just because we've had so much, like we're coaching a lot. We're just other work things, sponsors, this, like we've had people come into town. And it's not that I can like climbing outside. It's like a little harder than climbing inside for me right now. So if I want to get more mileage, it's inside. We've gone outside a few times, which has been great for, especially for our mental health, and just hiking and being outside is like, it just talks to my soul and I love it.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're going to do a bit more of that, like this during September and a little bit of October, kind of just go with the flow, like how big I'm going to get, how comfortable I'm going to feel. So far, so good. And then I hangboard like every day to warm up. So like I make sure my warm up is really intentional and good. So I train with Joy Black. She is, what is her Instagram handle? Let me just like look at it, because she's been amazing on my journey right now through pregnancy, and she's helping. Her Instagram is Climbing with Joy. So, and Joy has, I think she has 3 kids. I don't think it's 4. I think it's 3, but she is a trainer, and I know she works with like Hazel. She's working with Angie Payne, working with me. She's actually in Sheffield right now. She's been working with Shauna Coxey. She specializes in like deep core, pelvic floor, but she's also like a personal trainer, and she's been absolutely incredible. So, and she's actually going to come out here in October, and we're going to do some stuff together, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, cool. I've been working cross training, which even though like I prescribe it to like other people as well, like for a rope with my husband and I, like through our programs, like we tell people to do, like if it's a stretching routine or strength and conditioning routine on top of their climbing and training. Honestly, like I have been pretty bad about that for myself. So that's why I was like, I need to have a trainer help me do it, to keep me accountable. So that's why I connected with Joy, and she's absolutely awesome. And so I do that like cross training, I would say like strength and conditioning and other things like twice a week. So if I'm climbing about 4 to 5 days a week, I'd say more on average 4, cross training twice. I hangboard every day for a warm up, but then maybe like 2 days a week, I push it a little bit more like micros. So I'm still hanging, like, I think I was doing a 7mm 2-arm hangs the other day.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's funny because it gets like, I just listen to my body every time. Like I could still do a 1-arm hang on like the Beastmaker middle edge half cramp for like over 10 seconds, but my elbow is kind of like being a little irritated. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to do it anymore. It'll be there when I come back. So it's like little things. I don't ever push any of my climbing or my cross training to like 100%. Like I keep it, like, let's say out of 10, like I keep it at like a 7 or an 8.
And was that the case even pre-pregnancy? Do you try to train not quite at like a max, or were you pushing yourself more before you had a little human strapped to your belly there?
I definitely push it more. There's like strength and power days. Then I would do maximal effort things. So that'd be about 2 days a week. Before pregnancy, I was always doing 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. When I was younger, I would do 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. And I think that's like a pretty good schedule for if you're in like tip top shape, like when you're really young. I feel like sometimes kids overtrain and they don't know that they're overtraining. And they're just like, oh, my skin feels a little sore now. You're like, how many days on are you? 7? You're like, okay, well,
Right.
this is kind of the problem. But
Yeah.
so I like 4 to 5 days a week is like pretty good. And when we're training people, that's what we give them is like anywhere between like 3 in very few people 5 days a week. So yeah, I would say 4 is like a really good number for training and then cross training on top of it. But I make sure I always have like one full rest day a week that doesn't exclude like hiking or going on like, a 3 or 4 mile walk with my dog.
Yeah, and I do see that you post quite a bit of cardio, quite a bit of hiking, and hiking's great, just as you said, for mental health, just being out in nature, especially when you live in a place as beautiful as you do. But then also running. And I've always wrestled with running or just honestly cardio in general as a climber. And I'm a sport climber, so I probably use, more cardio than, a typical boulderer would. So I'm curious what your perspective is on that. Obviously, you enjoy running, but is it for climbing performance or for other reasons? And how do you think about running or just other kind of generalized cardio with your clients as a coach?
That's a great question. Yeah, when I was like before, let's say 24 or 25 years old, like you couldn't get me to hike or do cardio or anything. Like I hated it. And then I found the benefit of doing cardio I think again, I was around 24, maybe I was like 24 years old and I had a bad like World Cup season for myself. And I remember like halfway through the season, I said, if it came to Vail and I didn't make finals, I wasn't going to do the rest of the season. So I think the next World Cups were in China. That happened. I didn't make finals by like one spot. I honored my decision, didn't do the rest of the World Cups. And that was the first time I really like started climbing outside, like exclusively for a period of time. And I just started hiking up to Rocky Mountain National Park with my boyfriend at the time. This was like, I think I was dating Joel. And him and I would just like literally go like 4 or 5 days a week up to Rocky Mountain National Park. And I did my first V13. I did my second, like I think that week. And then I did my first V14. And I just remember like feeling fitter than I've ever felt in my life. And I was just like hiking all the time. And then and just climbing. So there was like a 2.5 month period where I went to the gym maybe like twice. And after that like 2-month break of doing competitions, my mom persuaded me to do the world championships in Munich. And I begged for her. I like really didn't want to go. She loves competitions more than anything. She's still like a head coach of a climbing team in Texas and she loves it. She's probably more competitive than me, believe it or not. I didn't have much money at the time. I was like, I don't want to go and I don't want to waste money on this. I'm having fun in the mountains. And I remember her paying for me. She's like, I'll pay, like, can we please go? Just be a fun trip, you and I. So basically I went and I actually came second at that world championships by one fall. Like if I had one fall less, I would have won. But I just remember like the whole time, like every boulder, I was so happy and I was present. I was in the moment. I didn't have this pressure because I didn't just train for this one moment. And doing the World Cup circuits for the years before, like I knew I was one of like the strongest. And I had the opportunity to win almost every World Cup that I entered. And majority of the times I would actually be first place going into finals. And I would always mess up finals. And for me, it was like this mental struggle more than a physical struggle. Mm-hmm. So this is where I found the balance for climbing outside and doing competitions. And I think that allowed me to do competitions for longer. But yeah, the competition came second. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was a great experience. So in some ways, yeah, that definitely helped me to do competitions for longer, getting better at them, balance of climbing outside and training. And I think that cardio aspect beforehand, just like hiking all the time, also started my love for doing cardio. So if I was hiking more than like 3 miles outside in the mountains, I would consider that a cardio day. So I wouldn't overdo my cardio. If I'm not doing hiking outside, then I'll definitely do like a 3-mile run, like 3 to 5 miles. I don't do anything crazy, but yeah, I don't know. I just love the feeling of exerting energy that like, it's different than climbing, obviously. Like I sport climb and people don't know that. I just don't do much outside, but like, even in the gym, like the other day I climbed top rope like a 13 plus, I think like a couple weeks ago. So I can still like, I've always been able to climb like even 14s like in the gym. I've only tried one 514A outside and I did it. This is like a year or two ago. And I do have goals for sport climbing outside, but I do find that running like helps my sport climbing. And some of the boulders that I've done, like one of the last V14s was like 38 moves long, like in a roof. So
yeah, that's a sport route.
So yeah, like, I mean, you definitely need minimum power endurance for bouldering outside, but like having a good cardio base and fitness base helps you. You're going to be hiking a lot of the times to the boulders, and then you don't really get 8-move boulders outside. If you do, they're like really hard. So I would say a majority of the boulders I'm doing are like about 15 moves long on average.
And then there's also the recovery between attempts, right? So like if you're doing a 10-move boulder or whatever it might be, and you want to do a lot of rips on it in a day because you've hiked your ass all the way out there, you know, you want to make the most of a day. You don't want to go out and just give like one attempt and then be flamed. So I'm assuming to some extent, some sort of cardio base is going to help with that like recovery between attempts. And when you say like a few miles or, you know, 3 to 5 miles, is that one day a week that you try to do that, or is it multiple days a week?
Well, I would say before like 3 weeks ago, I was running still like on average 3 to 4 days a week. And then the last few weeks, like I think I went like a whole week and a half without running a single day. And I just got like, some days maybe I was just tired, or some days like around 4 or 5 o'clock, if I sit on the couch and have a snack, I'm like, I'm just tired. Like I don't want to get up. So, and then I do motivate sometimes, like I need to go do my workout. I know I'll feel better afterwards. And I do my workout and I do feel better afterwards. So there are times when I just have to like find, like there's a difference between listening to your body because you're exhausted, and then listening to your body and being like, well, I'm not actually tired. I'm just like feeling like it's easier to eat cookies on the couch than it is to go work out. But in those moments, I still find that like after the workout, I'm really happy that I did it. And it's not actually that I overdid it or overtrained. Mm-hmm. So I would say right now, like I ran yesterday and then I went hiking the day before. Like yesterday, I walked 3.5 miles with my dog. And then later in the day, I ran like 3.5 miles. So so I feel that like it makes me happy when I'm doing it. And I'm this like pregnancy belly like strap thing like made such a difference, because around 3 months in, like maybe 3.5 months, when you're maybe like, I could tell, my husband could tell I was like showing like my clothes weren't really fitting me anymore. But like to the general public, it's like, oh, you're pregnant. Oh, cool. Maybe I can see like a little bit of a bump. Yeah. Like now that you pointed out, like it just feels like your uterus is like drop out. It just feels weird. It just feels like down there just so heavy that it's like uncomfortable. And I remember thinking like, wow, I thought this would happen when you're like visibly pregnant or bigger, like around the stage I am now. And it came way sooner. And other women, I posted something and other women were like, oh yeah, get like a pregnancy, belt strap thing. And I did, and it made all the difference. So yeah, it feels pretty good. Like yesterday, like the first 5 minutes always feel weird when I'm running. Like it's like, I just feel a little heavier down there. But then I get into it, and I was like passing people on my run. I was like, I mean, we live in a neighborhood with a lot of older people. So I feel like it's not hard to pass people if they're jogging as well. But I was like, oh, cool. Like I don't know. I felt maybe there's a little bit of the competitiveness in me. And I was like, and I just had a smile on. I was like, yeah, I feel like I'm doing it. I feel fit.
This episode is supported by Petzl, and I got to tell you guys, I am so psyched on their Spirit quick draws. I just got myself a new set, and they are an absolute dream. They are the lightest draws that I've ever owned. They're so, so light, and their unique design makes them so easy to grab and to clip, even when I am cruxing out on a route, which is often. I use the straight gate carabiner on the bolt side and the bent gate for the rope side, and I am telling you, the rope just falls right into that clip, which is a good thing, because I am not sure that there's anything scarier than going for a clip and missing it. And then also, I got to tell you, my favorite thing about the Spirits is that you can totally customize their colors. So I got mine in struggle green on the rope side and then silver on the bolt side. And I haven't seen anyone else out at the crag with that color combination, which means there is zero chance of me getting my gear mixed up and somehow 5 draws ending up in my buddy's bag. And I know that he's got my draws, but I can't prove it. Now I can prove it. because nobody's got my color but me. And for you tradies out there, you can color code your cams. It's such a cool system. You can customize your very own spirit draws over at petzl.com. Petzl, access the inaccessible. I want to shift now and talk about nutrition. And obviously, there's going to be probably a big difference between nutrition today and nutrition a few years ago. And so It's a rich territory. It's very individualized. Is there an area in nutrition that's been a struggle for you when you look back at your climbing career?
I wouldn't say really ever a struggle. So it's funny because climbing is a strength to weight ratio sport, right? And the hardest part of climbing and competition climbing is, and even seeing it now, is that unfortunately there is a lot of malnourished athletes and people like in my career time, I've seen people come in, they're like winning World Cups and like even men as well. It's not just for women. Like, and then 4 or 5 years later, they like literally, they're still doing their competitions, but then they're like nowhere to be found in, the top like 20 spots. And I really feel like this Red S and things that we're becoming more knowledgeable about is important, because I just don't think like the youth athletes today look up to some of, obviously the top athletes. And I feel like not that many youth teams talk about or get dietitians in and what is a healthy, like they just don't talk about it at all, because it's easier not to talk about it because it is such a taboo like subject in the sport, and it is a hard one. And I find like I struggle with that because, with our clients, I do talk about it. And like, what are the risks if you are malnourished? Because it's like you can drop a lot of weight. We've seen it from so many athletes. You drop a lot of weight and then you have this huge spike in your progression and you start doing really well and start all of a sudden winning competitions or exceeding your expectations. And usually people can hang on to that for like 2 to 5 years before you start getting injured or your energy levels are depleted and you think, oh, everything's great. I am eating enough. And it's not that they necessarily stop eating. It's that for how much they're demanding on their body and not fueling it in the right way. So I know Yanya has spoken out about that too. And it is this fine balance. And when I was personally at my skinniest, I was getting DEXA scans done all the time just to make sure I was still in a healthy BMI. And I never wanted to go under a certain weight. I think in all full transparency, when I was younger, like I want to say you're like maybe around 24, 25 years old, like at my absolute lightest, I was 115 pounds, but I was also weighing myself every day because I knew I never wanted to know what it felt like to go under that. Then I'm 5'2.5", and even 100, like there's so many athletes that are like way lighter than that, but even that are taller than me, but I'm very muscular. And so I knew that I couldn't even sustain that for a long time. Like I would go up after like 3 or 4 months. So I'd always go from like 115 to 120, and I would make sure that I would fluctuate between that. And if I wake up in the morning, go to the bathroom before having breakfast, I would weigh myself. And if I was like 114.9, I would make sure I ate more because I definitely never wanted to go under. And so I was probably always like 115 to like 117 in that range. And then before being pregnant, I think I usually was like 120 to 122. So not like a huge difference, but I felt more powerful being at the 119 to like 122 range. And that's just like, you find what's good for you in your body, but you have to be smart about it. And I think like when someone's not as knowledgeable about it and what the risks are, like you just drop weight and you're like, oh, I'm continuing to get better. It's not necessarily stronger, but like you're having better results. And I think that's where the slippery slope comes in. And then one day, you kind of some I guess experts say that you can, maybe you've heard of this as well, but like mess up your resting metabolic, like, your rate. So you can't like ever get it back to what it was before you already did all that damage, which is like quite scary. So yeah. So I was always like, I tried to be smart about it. I will have to admit, like when I first started doing cardio, I had a horrible diet growing up. We grew up on fast food. My mom was a single mom that took care of 3 kids. I had like literally a horrible diet. My healthiest meal of the week was like KFC. So,
Wow. Yeah.
so yeah, like, and it's not like she did the best that she, I mean, we like, it
Totally.
was hard and don't blame her for that or anything, but breaking the habit of not eating fast food all the time when that's what you literally grew up on
Mhm.
was quite hard. And so I learned to eat healthier when I was probably like in my early mid 20s, where maybe I would eat fast food here and there and I would cook a little bit more. But I love desserts. I have a sweet tooth. And running for me at first, like I was like, oh, wow, like I can do more cardio and I can eat more of the junk food that I want because then it eliminates it. And I don't think that's the healthiest mindset to have, but like I wasn't underweight. I just was doing cardio so that I could eat more of the shitty food that I wanted to eat, or eat more cakes, or, do it. I was like, I could eat a cake a night if I'm hiking up in Rocky Mountain National Park. And so it was like this weird, it's still a weird relationship with food. And I think most people, I'd say a lot of people lie if they deny it 100%.
It's always really interesting to hear how in touch you are with your body, with your performance, and the nutrition that makes you perform. And honestly, just hearing about like, running more kind of gave you that permission, if you will, to eat more cake. I think we all, to some extent, make those bargains with ourselves if we're a little bit focused on performance. And a way I've been looking at it lately is like, oh, actually, this cake is going to help fuel my run. So I don't know. It's like a little shift in the mind, at least, where it's not like the cake isn't the reward for the run. It's the fuel for the run.
Or I deserve it. It's like, yeah, like, oh, I earned this. Like I went hiking all day. I went climbing. I went for a run. I did all this stuff. Like I can reward myself with this. Like I've deserved it.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's fun after those epic days just to go ham. But then also, I think it assists in recovery. And so I'm curious, just over the years here, what you've learned about which types of food or food help you to perform the best. Like what are your go-to fuel sources, if you will?
Yeah. And I would say that's where I'm not like super type A with the food and nutrition and stuff. I've always said everything in moderation. And moderation has always been key for me. And sometimes so with the mental component of like having like have anxiety, and I started getting panic attacks around like the age 24, I think was like around my first panic attack, like full blown panic attack where I thought I was dying. And then I thought I had a brain tumor, and I was like, what is this feeling? This is crazy. And then I started to go to like therapy, which was amazing. But I think for me with food, like I crave sweets and carbs when I'm mentally not in a great place, or if I'm even just stressed, like lightly, like I am an anxiety eater. And I think there's also two different types of people where like usually women I find, and it's not always this case, but are more emotional eaters where say they go through a breakup. Women can tend to put on a little bit more weight. They get sad, they eat their emotions. And usually the guys that I've, in the past, like we've ended relationships, they've usually cut weight. And it's not that they're doing it on purpose. It's just that I find that guys typically, and again, it's not always this case, but typically like forget to eat, or they're depressed. And so, yeah, they just don't have an appetite. Mm-hmm. So I've always been that emotional eater, and it's hard. And I feel like I've never really been able to talk about that with like other, even sometimes friends or athletes, because like, oh, well, look at you. You're so fit. Like you must have like an eating disorder. If you're saying like, I hate, like literally I will make myself like feel so bad and sick at night because and I don't even have to be super anxious, but I'm just like sitting on the couch and it's just like this emotional eating response where I can't stop putting like the fork in my mouth, and I'm just like, my mind is going on like all the things that I've done that day or need to. And at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my God, my stomach hurts so bad now. And I go to bed with like the worst stomach ache. So I definitely like overeat in sense where like I just can't stop even when I'm full. And that's where my weird relationship, another part of it, has come. And when I talk about that with my psychologist, she totally gets it and understands. But that's something I can't feel like I really can say out loud that, with people understanding that. Because like, oh, well, you're not overweight. You're a high level athlete. But that's not what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying I'm overweight or this or that. Like, I will eat or gravitate to certain foods, and I have zero self-control when it comes to like sugar or anything bad in the house. Like if I don't want it, like I can't have it. And I wish I had a better relationship where it's like, oh yeah, like I can have this in the house and I won't eat all of it. One thing during pregnancy, I love sour candy. I've always grown up on eating candy and sour candy. And so I think that was one of my cravings. I always had it, but then being pregnant just had less self-control. And I was literally eating like this big bag of Sour Patch Kids, like to myself, like, cause Robin doesn't like them. Like I'd go through a whole bag in 2 days and my stomach was hurting all the time. And the midwife was like, just because you're pregnant doesn't actually mean like it's a misconception. You could just eat whatever you want. Like whatever you're putting in your body, you're still putting into your body and giving to your baby and fueling yourself. So like maybe try not to eat so much candy. Like try, eat more fruit with, not saying don't eat it at all, but eat more fruit, put strawberries and put like lemon or lime on top or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely have like my anxiety is part of like my eating habit. Sometimes I make poorer decisions. When I'm in a better mental place and happier overall, I think that self-control is a little bit better. And I don't mean self-control where I'm just eating vegetables and, like protein all the time. I definitely when I'm not pregnant, I definitely try to eat protein. Like we'll eat salmon 4 days a week. Now being pregnant, I don't really like the taste of salmon, which is like odd. So I've been craving like steak. That's the only like meat I've really been craving is red meat. And that's been a struggle. Like I'm anemic right now or like mildly anemic. I haven't checked it again, but I have to take an iron supplement daily, which is not fun. And I think a lot of women are anemic when they're pregnant. And if you're just an athlete, it's just like, you need more protein and more iron. So I think I use a lot of it up and I'm not getting enough protein in. So I think that's a challenge. So I'm trying to be more like, I guess, aware of what I'm putting in my body to some extent during pregnancy, because I do find it a little bit harder or not as enjoyable to eat certain foods.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Alex. I appreciate it, especially to just be as candid as you were about, this relationship that you can sometimes have with food, especially if you're feeling anxiety or some emotions. I think that's quite relatable. I know that when I'm feeling a lot of anxiety or if I'm kind of feeling some panic come on, it's like straight to the candy drawer and to the chocolate. So I've got many vices. I love chocolate. I love dark chocolate and I love donuts. Oh my God, do I love donuts. Pastries are like
donuts are so good.
My thing. I mean, yeah, like they're just the greatest thing on earth.
They're good.
So, yeah.
It's good. There's no way to put it except it's good. Like, and I've definitely been more relaxed being pregnant. And I'm like, this is the time when I can be even more chilled out about things. But yeah, it's funny. It's like, I wish, like, why can't we just have some and be satisfied when you're like anxious or you're feeling down or depressed and like not the whole bag to yourself? It's like, I just think some people are better with self-control than others. Yeah, I think that's just, we're all unique and different. And we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And I think, that's part of what makes us so different.
Let's talk about tactics now. We can talk about technique as well, by the way, in this chapter. So different climbing techniques. And certainly in the world of comp climbing, there's a lot of technique that I'm not very comfortable with or familiar with. But also tactically speaking, I had a lot of people write in and ask about projecting hard climbs and limit climbs. So what comes to mind when I bring up this idea here of technique and tactics for you?
Yeah, projecting hard climbs. Like, honestly, so I didn't have to think much about it when I was a comp climber. And because, again, everyone has their own, strengths and weaknesses. And when we're coaching people, we dive into that, like, what is their personal strength and weaknesses? And it's not always just physical. It's like, for me, it was like my mental approaches and emotional are like my weaker points or what can hold me back easily. And so when I was doing competitions and I had all this pressure, I put all my eggs in one basket. I'm like, and then that's why I wouldn't perform my best, like in a final. Then when I started climbing outside and I wasn't done with competitions, but I'm like, I'm just gonna go outside. And when I talked about like, that was like my first time, like really dedicating time to just going outside and having fun. Like, I remember I didn't have any pressure of like, oh, I need to send this V13 right now. Like I just got on them and I would do them in like a session or two. And clearly, obviously I was like not climbing at my full potential, but I didn't know what my potential was. And I was just having fun, and the pressure of not feeling like I have 5 minutes to do this boulder. I can do it in 5 years if I need to. I didn't climb ever with yeah, when you sit down at the bottom of a climb, I guess I was like, I'm going to try my hardest. I just have this feeling, but I wasn't like, I want to send this right now. And so it was really easy in the beginning when I was climbing outside because most of my pressure was just from competition. And then I was going outside and I was like relieving that pressure. Then when I started to really like have the pressure that I had in competitions, but now it was on projects outside, that became a challenge again. And there's so many climbs still I haven't done because that same mental thing where like I'll fall at the very end, like the last move, and then I would like pull back on like right away and then do that move. And it was just like something holding me back that wasn't anything like physical that I needed to train. So that like definitely in like my later 20s and early 30s became more problematic for me. I have this thing where, and it's funny because I talk about this with other people and there's a lot of people that are similar to this, that you're trying to climb, and you're like, okay, I really want to send it. So you have this pressure, even if you don't say it out loud, because you know, like it's more real if you say it out loud. So you're kind of playing these mind games like internally, and you're trying to tell yourself like, oh, it doesn't matter if it goes today, but like inside you're like, I really want to do this climb today. And so you're giving sunburn after sunburn, and you're falling, and say you're getting really close and you're just like falling at the last couple moves. And then usually when I like say that same session and it comes to like the end of the day and I'm really tired and I've already mentally like truly believe that, okay, well, I'm done needing to send it today. And I'm still going to pull on from the beginning. Like you've already had this realization, I'm coming back. And it's not like you're tricking your brain. Like you honestly believe that, like I'm coming back and you're okay with it. And so like you still pull on from the beginning, but you just don't have this pressure anymore. You're like, I'm just going to climb on it for whatever reason, or you're not overthinking it. And you're so tired. And then I find myself on the top of the boulder. And I'm like, oh my God, like how many times that's happened? It's like crazy.
Yeah.
And you're like, why can't I just start with that process? Like, why can't I like feel that relaxed in the beginning? Like, it's so annoying. And honestly, I haven't mastered that yet. Like, I know. And sometimes like, this is what I'm excited for, like having the baby, is that I will have hopefully like, and again, you don't know until you're in it, but like what I've been feeling and talking to other moms, it's like you're not just focused on the climb or what I want to do or this one goal. Like you have this like pleasant distraction. And sometimes it doesn't feel so pleasant, but like you have more than just this is your life, this climb, like in the moment, like this is what you want to do. Like maybe you have to like feed your baby, you have to do this. Like I'm really excited to travel with her and for us to have these adventures, and they're not always going to be easy, but like life isn't always easy. And so we're not naive in thinking like, it's going to be so smooth and joyful all the time. But I mean, my life hasn't been so smooth and joyful all the time. And you still, get through it. And it's just going to add and enrich your life. And I think hard things can still enrich your life. So
I think it's really that kind of experience, I think, in however we can kind of alleviate pressure on ourselves on the send, whether it's having perspective because we've got a million other things going on that we're excited about or that bring us joy, or the kids. Like whenever I go climbing with my daughter, I just like, there's zero expectation. I'm just like, let's just go out and have fun. And sometimes I send, sometimes I don't. Usually I don't even take on anything hard because I just want to go have fun. And then that's a different experience. And I've had recently Megan Martin and Paige Clausen on. Paige has like climbed some of the hardest things ever. Mm-hmm. The hardest boulder she's ever done, was like while her kid was taking a nap and she had like 45 minutes to run out to this boulder. So, I think that some people, to your point, it's all different. Some people become higher performing as parents. Some people really need a much longer time to recover or they settle in. It's just, everybody just finds their own lane. And, you have yet to experience it yet, but it'll be coming up soon. We'll do another interview here as you've got a little toddler running around. We'll see how it all went. But I am curious, just as like maybe kind of a pre-pregnancy question for you, when it comes to taking on like limit projects. I'm working on a really hard thing for myself right now, and the hardest moves are at the top. Well, let me actually rephrase that. The hardest moves are in the middle. Where I keep falling is at the top, where it's not really the hardest moves, but it's not like, a walk-off. It's like still hard. And so I'm wondering if like tactically you have any tips or thoughts about that. And I'm sure you've experienced this on some of the climbs that you've done where, you kind of make it through the hardest things. It's not V1 exits. There's still another crux up there, but I feel like I should be able to do it and I'm just not doing it. And so I'm curious if you've experienced that and if you have any thoughts around it.
For sure. I think like one trick that I like to do is, so you've probably like, have it in a couple halves or something that climb or overlapping halves. And so, like say you do you like pull on somewhere on the climb and then you'll climb it to the top after you fall. So like I've done a few things where like even on long boulder problems that I'm like, okay, I just like tell myself when I get to this one point that I've done it like in two overlapping halves, like I just pulled on. And because every time I just pull on there, like I'll do it.
Right.
And it's fine. And so I think that's like one trick that's like quite good to like, visualize and really like hone in. And I'm a strong believer in like, you can try to like, I guess, manifest like how you want to be or feel. For example, like if you are in a competition or outside, like competition is easier because it's like, you have a short period of time. So if you're like, I don't want to fall, I don't want to mess up, I don't want to fall. And that's all you're focused on, you're more likely to fall and mess up versus like, if you mentally think in a neutral to positive way. So when I'm coaching people, I always say like, okay, when you're approaching a climb, even let's say you're in training, and I feel like there's a spectrum. And in the middle is neutral way of thinking. And then to the right of it, let's say it's a more positive mindset. To the left of neutral is a negative mindset. And so if we get to a climb, we're looking at it before we even get on and we think, wow, that looks hard, or I don't know what to do, or that looks like a big move. Any of these things are in the negative mindset. And we need to push them out as fast as we can and replace it with a neutral to positive mindset, being like, okay, cool. Like, how do I want to do that? Or I want to do that climb. That looks fun. That looks cool versus thinking, oh, that looks scary. Or I don't know, that looks big. That looks too hard. Those footholds look bad. So we have to like reframe our mindset, like even right before we pull on to a more positive way of thinking. And because when we are in this mindset of a positive way of thinking, we can surprise ourselves more in a positive way. So you don't have to like sit there and try to like lie to yourself and think, oh, that looks easy, I'm going to flash that. Like that's like so far because it's a spectrum, right? But instead, if we see ourselves intimidated, say before you're getting on that climb again, you're like, oh, I hope I don't fall there, or I hope I can get through that. Or, these like more negative thought processes, like instead reframe that like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to get there and then I'm going to just tell myself I just pulled on or I've done that part so many times. I know those holds. I know what it feels like to feel good on them. Like, and I know like I would love to do this climb, like just things that are more positive and then carry that with you while you're climbing.
Love that. Okay, great. I think that's a very useful mental tactic for me to.
Yeah, it's definitely easier said than done, but that's like practice, like for sure. And I learned this when I was like, I was doing the World Cup circuit. I lived in Innsbruck, Austria, and I was climbing with the Austrian team a lot. And one of my really good friends on a store, like so many competitions I like failed at or messed up at because of a slab. And I was known for being horrendous at slab climbing. And so,
me too.
But I would practice them. Yeah, and it's like hard because you're like, oh, I'm practicing them. And I always tell people like, practice what you want to get better at. I call it the 60-40 rule. So minimum like 60% of the time you should be getting on climbs that are targeting your weaker styles. And then, yeah, you can like get on climbs that target your strong suits. So you are still like improving at what your strengths are, but you're becoming a more well-rounded climber faster by getting on things that you're not as good at. So I was doing that, but then my mindset was holding me back because in practice, I would say like, okay, I got on slabs all the time, or coordination climbs or dynos, things that were harder for me mentally, typically. And I just remember one session, I was on this climb like, oh, like I suck at slab. I'm so bad. And she just looks over at me. She's probably a little annoyed because I probably said it all the time. She's like, you're not bad at slabs. Like, stop saying that. And usually the stubbornness part of me would like bite back. But for the first time, like I didn't say anything. And I sat there and I internalized that. And I thought like, well, like my first thought was like, well, I'm bad at them. That's why I lose World Cups. But instead of saying anything, I thought, why don't I take that and start actually thinking that? while I'm training on them. Like think like, okay, cool. I want to do that. That looks fun. Even though it's not usually fun, but like I did trick my brain a little bit, but I would implant that thought before every single attempt to be like, okay, I want to do that. That looks cool. That looks fun. If it was a dyno, if it was a coordination, if it was a slab. And oh my God, it was like the best thing that I've ever done. And no one told me to do that. I just like, I don't know. I just had this like realization, like, let's try something different. Maybe I became a little more mature and, and wanted to try something new. And I remember going to the next World Cup season and I actually started climbing so much better in slab before that. I was so confident. The first boulder was a slab that only 2 people did. And it was me and Akio Nadaguchi. And I was the only one to flash it. And all these coaches from the other World Cups, like they would film like the top climbers and they would like, it came over to me and this is after qualifiers and like, you flashed that. Like I had to look at my camera to make sure it was you. And I was like, yeah, like I've been practicing it, my mindset, like, physical, everything. And I'm good at slab now. And I remember there was a couple like World Cups coming up and some of the head setters I was like friends with because I also lived in England then at some period of time. And this one English guy was like going to be the head setter at this comp in Canada. And before the comp, he's like, oh, well, there's some slabs out there. And I'm like, good, bring it on. Like, I like them. I'm good at them. And in finals, I remember flashing the slab.
Yes.
And it's like, I had to prove other people wrong, but I had to prove to myself first. And not listen to the people that wanted to like, say things like, oh, like she's not like commentators. I remember like I'd always watch World Cups back and they're like, yeah, she's not usually good at this. And then I remember a commentator being like, oh, wow, like she's doing it. She's flashing it. And I think it was like that World Cup the World Championships that I came second in. And they're like, wow, her mental game is so much better now. And so I think it was really cool to see, like to prove people wrong. It's kind of like proving that universe or the person or the people wrong. Like I had to internalize it first, prove to myself that I could in whatever way. And then, I was excited to prove it to others as well.
This episode here is supported by Fizzy Vantage, the official climbing nutrition sponsor of The Struggle. And just let me tell you guys real quick why I love Fizzy Vantage. Yes, their stuff is the best of the best when it comes to supporting my goals as a climber. And yes, it dissolves the best and tastes the best of any other powders, protein powders, collagen powders, any other mixes out there that I have tried. And I've tried all of them. But beyond all that, y'all, I just love that this company was created by climbers for climbers and is a very active member in the climbing community. Fizzy Vantage founder and legendary coach Eric Hurst has been a friend of mine for years now, but I've been using Fizzy Vantage products for years before I even had a podcast. And I got to know Eric. He's been giving back to our community as an author, a route developer, and a coach for decades now. And he created Fizzy Vantage to bring the best science-backed nutrition to our sport so that we can all feel and perform our best. I use their supercharged collagen and their PowerPlex vegan protein every single day to support my training and my recovery. It is crazy delicious. Plus, Eric's going to be hooking you all up with a sick deal here just for listening to The Struggle. You can hit that link in your podcast app or use checkout code STRUGGLE15 over at fizzyvantage.com to save 15% off any full-priced nutrition order here in North America, or you can pop over to the Banana Fingers and Epic TV online shops if you are in Europe. Let's talk about shoes for a second here because this episode is supported by SCARPA and they just make the absolute best shoes in the game. Oh my gosh, I love them so much. I have been climbing in SCARPAs for a decade now and I just love the way that they fit and they perform on rock and also at the gym. I've been loving the Instincts, the VSs and the VSRs on my project out at the Red because they can toe into those little pockets and stand on edges so well. They heel hook like a dream. And then in the gym, as I've been climbing on the Moonboard and the gym set problems, I've been using their Veloce Ls, the lace-ups. They're soft. Oh my gosh, you can just feel everything. They're super dynamic. I feel really athletic in them. So look, whether you're a weekend warrior like me who's just trying to get the most out of my time at the gym and out on the crag, or a pro like Sean Rabitou or Nina Williams, Nathaniel Coleman, Alex Puccio, Jordan Cannon, or Maddie Hong, holy smokes, what a team. SCARPA's got you covered. They've been sustainably making the best dang footwear for climbers, trail runners, and skiers since 1938. I love my approach shoes. I love my climbing shoes. And I think you will too. Give them a shot. You can shop the whole collection over at scarpa.com. SCARPA, no place too far. This provides a fantastic segue into the mental game chapter, so we can just continue to peel back on this for just a little bit here. And you had mentioned earlier in our conversation that your mindset early on in your earlier comp years, you felt had been holding you back. I mean, you obviously performed at the absolute highest level and won World Cups, but you felt maybe you could have won more, it sounded like, had you implemented some of the mental tactics that you were doing a little bit later that you're doing now, and maybe that you just touched on as well. And so can you just try to distill a little bit of that down for us here? I'm curious, looking back, what you know now, had you known it then, what do you feel you could have done a little bit differently? What mental hacks, what little mental tricks do you find work for you when the pressure's on, whether it's at a competition or just when you want to try something really hard outside that means a lot to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Like, it's funny because I do look back at my career and think like my competition career, let's say, and it's seeing like the people and the kids and everything today, like they take it way more serious. And I think it is, the sport is becoming, especially for competitions, like way more serious, especially with Olympics and everything. And not that people didn't take it more serious than I did when I was competing at World Cups. Like, the Austrian team, the French team, all these teams had more funding. They had coaches for them and everything. Like, I didn't have a coach since like 16, 17, I think since 16 years old, I just coached myself. And so I think like, yeah. And I do wonder sometimes like what it would have been like if I had more of this, these things that are now there for like USA climbing and stuff like at my disposal. Like, I mean, I paid for every single World Cup that I went to. Like I paid for everything. And I remember when I moved to Europe, I moved to Europe on a one-way plane ticket, not knowing I was going to move to Europe or / England. And I had like $2,000 in my account, like not much. I didn't make much from sponsors at all. I think I made collectively like $500 or $600 a month. And the way I funded myself to go from one World Cup to another is if I placed high enough to make it to the next World Cup. So, and I would literally buy a plane ticket when I was like, say, in Switzerland to go to the next World Cup in Slovenia or something, like from weekend to weekend. And it was exciting and I wouldn't take that part back, but like, and it molded me into like kind of the person I am today in some regards. But also I wonder what it would have been like if I had more of these like things at my disposal, like the training, the psychology component, taking it more serious, because even when I lived in England for those years, like my diet wasn't really good. I definitely was a little bit more of the wild child than some of the competitors these days. I think it's just kind of funny because like, I mean, yeah, I definitely would go out and parties. Well, I had this balance between like, and not say it was the best balance, but I mean, I just had a different life, I guess, growing up. And so I feel like I matured earlier than maybe some people that I see these days, which isn't necessarily a good thing. It's just what it was for me. So yeah, I could have been a bit more, let's say, strict on my training and taking it more serious. But then I also probably had like, well, I'm funding everything and I'm doing this. And so I kind of just like, I just climbed. And I think one of the things that helped my climbing so much was moving to England, because I climbed at Sheffield, the Climbing Works. I remember the first day walking into that gym and it's like 60% vertical and slab. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm going to get so weak here. And I just like, oh my God, like where are this? There's like one board and a few steep angles, but honestly, it made like my technique and everything like so much better. So in hindsight, that helped me a lot because we didn't have slabs in America at that point. Like we called a 15-degree overhung wall a slab in a gym. Like we just didn't have them. So yeah, it's changed a lot. So I think like, I don't know what it could have been. I do. And all these like mental things that I have found, like I just did everything for my own trial and error. Like I didn't have any coaches. I didn't have help. I didn't, I paved my own way. Like, I mean, from USA Climbing, I got a free jersey. And I think they paid for a few entry to competitions, which was like $60 per competition. Actually, at one point, like they try to invoice me for the entry fee to the competitions for the season, which was like $50 or $60 per competition. And I was just like, I'm sorry, but I'm not paying this. I refuse, because I'm your only athlete a lot of times in the competitions representing, and maybe 80% of the comps, I would always be in finals. And then I was always, usually when I made finals, I was on the podium. So there's so many comps that I came like second and third so many times. And I've even tied in finals and it's gone back to semifinals. So many times I've made like a little mistake and it would cost me, but you can wonder what it would have been like. But I don't really live life with that many regrets. It shaped me into who I am today, and I wouldn't have that any other way.
Yeah, it is. It's such a different world now. It's so interesting. Like the sport's quite young still, and it has changed like a crazy amount in the last 15 years to now, looking at the facilities, the coaching, the resources, what we just saw in Paris with the Olympics, and hopefully it continues on an upward trajectory and there's more resources to come in and support the sport and the athletes so that everybody can continue to progress. But yeah, in a sense, you were in a bit of the dark ages. And before that, when I had a conversation with Lynn Hill, it was obviously a different sport then as well. You have a unique perspective as a coach and working with youth athletes. Well, you did at ABC Climbing, and now you work with, I'm assuming, athletes of all ages. But how do you look at like mindset and the mental game and any sort of techniques with the athletes that you're working with now? And especially like as you're working with youth athletes or competitive climbers, do you talk much about the mental side of climbing, or are you more focused on the physical training?
Definitely we talk about both of them. And I think like, again, some people are just so good mentally, that's their strong point. And then they are just like, they just have it. Like they don't even have to overthink it. And it's part of them. And some athletes, it is more mental, like it was for me. And, and I tell them kind of these like stories that I can relate to myself, kind of like some of them that I told you. They can relate to that. Like, oh, wow. Like, okay. Like she's gone through it as well. Like it's because it is hard. Like you've not gone through something to be able to like relate to it. Doesn't mean you can't teach it. Like, I mean, just because there could be great coaches out there and they've never been a World Cup climber, right? And just because you're a professional athlete doesn't mean you're going to be a great coach. Right. So I think like you don't necessarily have to have gone through the experience, but it does help to like relate and be like, hey, look, like I've gone through this as well. Like, and this has like really helped me and this is what I found. And I am a strong believer in that, like an athlete's going to be good regardless. Like a person's going to be, they can hit their max potential regardless of the coach or not. The coach doesn't make the person. They can help guide you and get you there quicker on your journey and help like, take some of the pressure off yourself of what needing to do. And even if you know what to do, it like maybe keeps you accountable, having the coach, someone telling you like, let's try this, but you also have to put all of your trust in that relationship that they're doing the best for you as well. And so it is like a give and take relationship between a coach and a client, if they're a kid or adult or a professional or not. And we do actually coach a lot of kids across the world. And some of them, it's like, I do realize that excuses, that's another mental component where say someone is making up a lot of excuses like, oh, well, it's just really hot out, or, oh, I just fell there, or yeah, like maybe I'm just a little tired or this or that. Like, no, there's a reason why you fell. There's a reason why you didn't succeed. Like you have to stop making the excuse, and excuses just hold us back. Not saying like things can't be valid as well, but like you mess something up physically as well. But that mental component, if you don't want to realize what the flaw was, like you're never going to get better at what those flaws are. So it's like, I think the mental and the physical kind of go hand in hand in some ways. Like your mental will then affect how you climb physically, right? And then if you climb physically bad, that can like put you downward spiral mentally. Sure. So it's never just like a one-sided thing. And I think every person is like unique in what is going on with them. I think for youth athletes, honestly, like it's hard, but I do, even when I was like competing in the youth myself, and then when I was coaching at ABC, and then when I've coached like, I've coached momentum as well when I lived in Salt Lake City, and now we coach people and kids and everything. But parents can sometimes feel like they're doing the best for their kids and they want the best, but then they don't need another coach if their parent is not their coach. And I think sometimes parents cross this boundary of, let's just say a helicopter parent, a little too much. I love my mom, but like there is a couple of times I had to tell her off when I was even like in my late teen years, when I was doing competitions, like this is her competitiveness. Like say I was like second going into finals at a comp in the US, and she's like, what happened? And I'd be like, yeah. What do you mean what happened? Like, I'm happy with that. Like, I mean, I think it was at one stage, Alex Johnson and I were like trading off, like I'd win one, she'd win the next one. I won one, she'd win the next one. And if my mom said something like that, I would just be like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I'm super happy. And I knew she wanted the best for me, but like, that's not really the best. And it's hard because no one's perfect.
Yeah, and they may not even know the way she was showing love and support was by trying to push you to be the best, which she knew you could be. But it is interesting to hear from a youth athlete's perspective that oftentimes what we don't need is another coach, as you said. What we need is just a fan, is just like a total supporter, regardless of where we stand on the leaderboard or did we do the thing or not.
Someone just to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone just to listen to you and to be like, okay, we'll pick up the pieces or celebrate when you want to celebrate, or just to be there. And, and it's hard because you do see some youth athletes and kids where the parents put so much pressure or they do so much for them in this sport and it's great, but then they get to like mid-20s or late 20s, or like the kids are like a little bit lost because they just had their parent there 24/7, and then they're like, oh, like I didn't spread my wings enough. And I remember like one really cool thing when I was at ABC in Robin Irvinsfield, Brooke started doing some of the adult competitions in the US. And it was super cool because I'm like, oh, Robin, you're not going to this like, pro US comp, and you're not going with Brooke. And she's like, no, like I want her to have that time on her own and for her to experience that and grow with that. And I thought that was like super cool. I was like, wow, like she's 16 or 15 or something. And she's like allowing her to have this like space. And because I think Robin could relate, she's like, I just want her to feel like she's becoming an adult and I want her to feel that. And I just thought that was like really cool. And I know Robin, I feel like is sometimes like a type A personality where she is that kid. She's like an adult, like, the puppy that never grows up. Like, I don't know how Robin has so much energy. It's amazing. I'm like, oh my God, like how do you will always be a kid? And it's really cool. And my Robin's like that too. Like he'll be 40 in October. And I'm like, you're like your 14-year-old boy. Like, I don't understand. So it's very admirable to say the least. But yeah, that stuck with me. I was like, that's really cool that Robin is like allowing her to have that space to grow up and, do it. And it's not that Brooke even asked for it. Like Robin just was like, yeah, I'm just not going to go because, maybe at one point she'll want me at the comps too, but I need to allow her to like have this space for herself.
You coached at ABC for a while, and I'd love to talk about Brooke Rabatou for a second here. She just came off this incredible performance in Paris and also has been doing really impressive things outside. And that reminds me of you with incredible comp performances as well as really breaking limits and barriers outside on rock. And you coached Brooke for a while, right?
Yeah, I think I was at ABC for a few years. It's pretty cool, like, to see this relationship that, like, Brooke is a really good friend of mine now. Like, there is this photo that I posted on my stories the other day on Instagram that was, like, me holding her, like, at a competition. Like, and I was like, she must have been, like, I'm 12 years older than her. So I was like, maybe she's, like, 6 years old or something. And it was just so funny because I'm like, then I just remember, telling her, like, at a competition, I think, when youth and adult were, like, the same weekend or something, and she would watch the adult comps. And I was like, you're so strong. We're going to be competing against each other someday. You're going to be like the next, huge star. And it was funny because actually I coached her before she entered into the adults. And then so I coached her and I got to see all that and it was really cool. And then in the adults, like there's a few years where I was competing against like her and Ashima and stuff. And I was like still winning. I was like, okay, but I was like, they're coming up. Like, I mean, It's getting a little harder for sure, these little monsters. And it was a cool transition. And then like during COVID, we grew to become like more like our little COVID family, like really good friends as well. And so like our relationship just like evolved over the years. And so before I got pregnant, like her and Natalia, like we're all like we're each other training partners. And in 2021, we just like went outside like every day together, like in Rocky Mountain National Park. It was like so cool to see all that. Or it was like, I think the end of 2020 or something, when we were allowed to like go back outside, like we would just have a cute little COVID family and we would just like stick together and just like climb every day outside and just have so much fun and like really grow from that. And so then when they're training more for competition, every time Natalia is in town, she would call me up like, hey, let's like train again. And I think they would like to use me as their, like their training partner for like a kilter board session or something, like, because I still felt good because I could still keep up with them on like a kilter board or a tension board. Not to toot my own horn, but a lot of times like outclimb them still.
Yeah.
But it's like everyone has their superpower, and it like made me feel cool too. Because I'm like, okay, like, yeah, they're like at the top of their game, like doing the competition. And it doesn't mean like it just showed me like it's not that I'm not strong enough to do that. Like, I mean, you get me on a dyno or something and I'm like V5. So it's like they would destroy me, and most people destroy me on like before pregnancy, like on anything that's like dyno or coordination related. So, but then on the board, like, I think I was just that partner for them that they didn't feel competitiveness, and like it wasn't like a competition, like, oh, this is my competitor in a competition. Plus I'm like on a board with them. So like they could, I guess use me as like a rabbit kind of in a good way, in a fun way. We would have fun with it. And it was always like a fun competition where we'd be like supporting each other and having fun and motivating each other. And yeah, you kind of just like one person does something, okay, and the other person wants to do it too. And it like would make me like try harder, and it would make them try harder. So I do miss that. Hopefully I can get back to that after having the baby, and then the baby can like watch. And I with Brooke the other day, I'm like, it's so cool. Like I hopefully like what I have been like with you, like you can be that for my daughter. That'd be super cool.
Love that. You spend time with her, and of course, your career has followed this trajectory of, competing, winning World Cups, focusing outdoors, and climbing some of the hardest blocks outdoors as well. Do you have a sense for like what makes Brooke special? Like what's her superpower, do you think, beyond, what apparently is just kind of dominating whatever she decides to take on? Where do you think she's going to take her climbing over the next handful of years here?
Wow. It's so hard to like even know, but like, I mean, I think her lightheartedness and like, she's just like she's a fun, loving person. And I think that mental part like keeps it going and is like really inspiring to other people too, because taking it too serious sometimes, then you can get like wrapped up. And I think that was parts of me where I had like when I did get wrapped up in it and became more mental. And I think Brooke talked about that at one point when she like had a good and Natalia did as well, like had a good World Cup season, and then the next season wasn't so good. And I think like the expectations that we put on ourselves, I think that's hard to internalize sometimes, and that can be a hindrance. And so every top athlete, I think, goes through that. And but then if you go through it and like learn from it, you can come out stronger on the other end. So I think, Brooke has had some of that, Natalia's had some of that, and then finding the funness as well. Like, you can't obviously take it lightheartedness the whole entire time, but then you do need that balance. Like you do need to like realize like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I'm having fun doing it. So I think like Brooke usually does that like quite well. Not that she doesn't have the pressure. And she's even talked about some competitions where she's had like too much pressure on herself and she needed to take a step back, and how climbing outside like really helps balance that for her. And I know that was like a huge part for me too, when I was still doing the competitions in my like late 20s. And that's part of the reason why I kept on doing them for so long, because I had that like that good mental balance eventually. But it's hard to see what, I don't know, like there's so much potential, and then you just see, people like change the perspective. And I think for me, like personally with competitions, I remember it was like the national team trials before the first Olympics. And I pulled out from the team trials the day before. And I wrote the president of USA Climbing, and I was like, I'm really sorry, but I'm pulling out. I had just won Vail World Cup like a few months before it, or sometime like right before it. And I was like considered like one of the big hopefuls to go to the Olympics at the time for the US. And for me, it was this thing where I was like, well, I love climbing outside, and I thought I would have to give up that for like a whole year or so minimum, and maybe not do it as much, and maybe I wouldn't have that balance. So I struggled all the way until the day before the competition, and I pulled out the day before. And I think also a big component of that was the speed climbing for me, because I was not a speed climber, and I would have a year like to learn the route, but I just didn't want to have to do all three, like a new discipline on top of it, because I thought that would take too much time away and I wouldn't enjoy it as much. And so I think that was a struggle. I finally came to the conclusion, like, I don't think I'm going to enjoy the process of, even if I made it to like having to like do speed as well.
Yeah, what an interesting perspective to be at the top of the game and have the clarity like you did to decide what would bring you more joy and fulfillment. And I do find it very interesting that in your experience, when you did take a break from competitions for a little bit and you decided to spend some time outside, you very in quick order climbed your first V13 and then your first V14. We saw Brooke go out and in pretty short order climb box therapy, depending on who you ask. That's V15 or V16. Yanya went out and climbed a V16 twice in a row? Or V15?
Yeah, I think that. He was 16 like twice in a row. Yeah. And I think it's quite cool because I know Brooke, I was talking to the other day, she's like, I really want to spend this whole next year climbing outside as much as possible. She has all these plans to go on these trips and stuff. And, and she has such a passion for climbing outside. I mean, there's like athletes that didn't really do that when they were competing, when I was competing. And I always thought that was so like cool that their mental game could be that like all their eggs are in one basket. Like Shauna was one of them. She climbed outside here and there, but Shauna was one, Akio was another. And I was just like, oh my God, their mental game is so freaking strong because they can literally put everything and then still. And for me, it's like, I was just realizing I couldn't do that. And I found like when I climbed outside, it was like, I stumbled upon it. Like I did a lot of things when I was learning and I was like, oh wow, like I can do competitions. And and that part, like I said earlier, like I knew I was like the strongest. I knew I had the potential to win every competition that I entered, just like I did in like the US. I won kind of like almost every competition for quite a few years, but it was just like this mental thing. I put too much pressure on it. So yeah, climbing outside when I started doing that, like really took that pressure off. So I think like Brooke has that, she's so mentally strong. I think she's way mentally stronger than I was for the competition scene. But I think the climbing outside like brings her so much joy that she was saying like, I kind of need that for, being able to want to go to the next Olympics and the next and see. And I think that's a cool thing, like not putting the expectations on, like you have, I would say like a rough draft plan of what you want things to be like. And then things can change along the way and that's okay. And it's going to, and you kind of just have to keep on checking in with yourself to see like what is right for you.
I do think we're going to probably see, well, let me ask you, post Olympics now, where at least some of the immediate pressure of performing in comps is alleviated from both the men and the women, at least for a period of time here. Do you think a lot of these indoor crushers are going to be moving outdoors and breaking new ground on boulder problems that have just been sitting around there waiting for the next generation to come out?
I hope so. Yanya has been posting, she's in Seiyu's working on a very hard route right now, which could be potentially the first female in the world to do a certain grade of boulder and route, which she's very deserving of that because she's definitely at the top of her game and then for women in the sport. And it's really cool to see. And she's a great representation. So she deserves all of that. And yeah, I think there's some people that just don't like climbing outside. So they probably won't. They just love training. Like that's what they love to do. And that's really cool. I was a gym rat, like I said, until like my mid 20s. I just loved climbing inside, even if it was just going in and there was no training really involved, just like climbing on random climbs the whole time. So yeah, hopefully we see more and more. I think like it's hard. Like I think there's so many athletes like Shauna, she's climbing harder than she's ever climbed, in her life outside. And it's really cool. And I think her baby's about 2 years old now. And she's like doing B14 on the regular and taking these trips. So, and I think she's like, trying to climb a V15. For how easily she's climbing a V13, it seems like some of the 14s, that's going to be right around the corner, hopefully for her.
Yeah.
And it's like really inspiring. So I think it's like, we're all just like pushing each other. And I think that's what makes the sport grow. And I definitely don't feel like I'm out of my prime yet. And I think that's what I'm really excited about is that coming back and experiencing that journey, Shauna and other people, and we get to like do it together. And I think this Brooke and Natalia and everyone that are in their like early mid 20s now, it's like pushing us to keep on like having that. It's competitive, right? But it's like, you don't want the other person to do bad. You don't want I think there's a good competitiveness and some people are not as good in that competitive nature. But like I said, like climbing with like Brooke and Natalia is really cool because you want the other person to send, you also want yourself to send. And like, it just motivates you more than like this bad, toxic competitiveness. It's like, we can motivate each other and like lift each other up and like have fun doing it. And I think that's like really special in our sport, especially when there's like more and more strong women like coming out and trying hard things.
Oh man, I'm so psyched. I'm so psyched to see what goes down here over this next couple of seasons and for you as well. But the last thing I want to ask you about for this part of the conversation here is your coaching. And so you and Robin, your husband, have rope coaching and you post some great stuff. I've talked with people who work with you, and just recently, Davis, Dr. Climb, was popped into a show, did a little surprise appearance with me and Anna Hazelnut on one of our crag chats. And I know he's been working with you all. Are you taking clients if people want to work with you? How do they work with you? And how do you like to work with climbers? What's your philosophy?
Yeah, we're definitely taking clients. We don't advertise as much if we're taking on new clients and things just because like there's this like good, like consistent flow, but we are taking like here and there, we'll take a few more clients on every time just because it is just Robin and I right now. We are growing. We have some things in the works that are exciting right now to be able to reach more people, let's just say. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things that are coming like within this year and next year for us in growing the business. And we have started a YouTube channel for rope, and that's ROAP, but play on words. People are like, oh, wait, it's funny because like some people are like ROAP, or like, how do you pronounce soap? Why don't you just replace the S with an R? And how do you say that? Like even Robin's parents keep on saying ROAP. We're like, oh my God, we're never going to get it. But
Both language is a little funky. Yeah.
Yeah. And we created because like rope, play on words for climbing, but also it stands for like Robin O'Leary, Alex Puccio. So then we came up with like rope coaching. But yeah, we absolutely like love coaching. Like he's been a professional coach for like over 20 years. He was also the head coach when I met him for the Great Britain paraclimbing team. And then he had his own youth team, and then he coached like adults and elite athletes. And then I've just always been like a natural coach, I think, since I just love helping people. And I think when I got older, even if I'm just at the gym and I just like, I've definitely developed more like tactical aspects of like if I'm sitting next to some random person, like I won't just like shout out advice to them. I'll just be like, I'll watch, I'll climb with them, and I'll talk to them, and then I'll be like, do you want some like do you want a tip for that like one move or whatever? But yeah, like it's just like burning inside me. Like I really want the best for people and I love helping. It's just like a natural thing. So started to coach at a young age when I was like 16. I just like absolutely love it. And so now it's like having our company and seeing that grow. It's like another baby of ours, I guess. And we just enjoy it so much. Being able to like help so many people, we'll develop like a fully personalized training programs for our platinum and gold clients. And we talk to them constantly so that they can like change it. And like I said, everyone is so unique with different strengths and weaknesses. So it's not like one cookie cutter thing for these like platinum clients. And then we are going to have in the future plans, I'm not going to say everything that it is, but you guys will find out soon enough that we'll be able to target more people and help more people worldwide, but in a, I think, more cost efficient way, because personalized training programs are not cheap. Climbing is not cheap, and it's just getting more expensive these days with memberships and like gear and everything. So yeah, we're excited.
Cool. Well, I'll link to, your YouTube channel and Instas and all that stuff here in the show notes. So if anybody wants to work with Robin or Alex, you can reach out to them there, but also we'll stay tuned for Rope 2.0 as you're going to be making some announcements. It sounds like really cool. Well, Alex, this has just been such a joy. I really appreciate all the time that you took to just open up about your career, and really excited for all the things that you have ahead, the adventure ahead for you and Robin. Thank you so much for joining the show here.
Thank you. It's been fun. I told you, like, sometimes you can just like my ADD brain, like you will ask a question. I knew like sometimes like veering off, but like, I'm like, okay, let's like remember to circle it back or whatever. But yeah, like I told you, it's like harder to get me to shut up than it is to get me to talk.
No, it was so great. And look, my wife milked the quote unquote pregnancy brain card for months.
Oh yeah.
She's still doing it. I'm like, no. Like, we're years beyond this thing, but like, you get to play that card for a while now.
Oh my God. But the funny thing is, it's like also, like, Robin has like really bad ADD too. So, but it's funny because like, I'm like, oh, pregnancy brain, if I just want to say that. But then I'm like, oh my God, my memory is still better than my husband's. I'm like, what's his excuse?
Alrighty, Ro, that wraps up this fantastic conversation with Alex Puccio. God, has she just been dominating the sport for so long. She's such a hero of mine. Thank you, Alex, for taking the time and for just opening up, being so vulnerable and open and insightful in this conversation. So grateful for it. So excited for all the big changes that are coming to your and Robin's life right around the corner here with that kiddo on the way. And speaking of good things on the way for you, dear listener, although this isn't the best segue, I will fully admit I'm fighting a cold right now. So Alex may have pregnancy brain, but I've got Dayquil brain, and that's a real thing. So anyway, usually I have better segues, but my segue now into teasing up what the bonus episode is with Alex is talking about all the good things to come. A bundle of joy of bonus episodes coming your way. And what does Alex share in this one? Man, she just like dialed it in. I don't know if she chugged some caffeine or something like that, but when we got into this bonus episode conversation, she was like locked and loaded. She talks about finger training and talks about how to train specific grips in a way that I haven't heard anybody on this show talk about. We cover efficiency tips, breaking through a plateau, bouldering plateau, V7 specifically was a question from one of the patrons who wrote in. How to work on one-arm progressions. Oh man, I loved this conversation. She talks about indoor versus outdoor grades and why indoor grades she feels are harder or more sandbagged. Really interesting perspective there. She covers common mistakes for beginner, intermediate, and advanced climbers. She really put on her coaching hat for that. And then she talks about an experience that she has at the gym, not an uncommon experience, where she might go flash something really hard, like a V12, and then put 10, 20, 30, 100 efforts on a V6 and what that has taught her, and honestly, more importantly, what that can teach all of us. She puts forward a 70-30 rule that I'm going to start implementing when I get to the gym this week. You can get instant access to all of that right now at zero cost, actually, with a free trial over at patreon.com/thestruggleclimbing-show, or right there in your Apple Podcast player if you are an iPhone person. And you're also going to get instant access to more than 60 hours of other bonus content featuring the best of the best. Adam Ondra, Chris Sharma, Nina Williams, Alex Honnold, and so many more athletes and coaches that have been on the show here. Plus, pro clinics on stronger fingers with Dr. Tyler Nelson, advanced bouldering with Allison Vest, moonboard with Ravioli Biceps, performance hacks with Hazel Finley, and so many more. It's all there for just a few bucks a month, or actually zero cost right now with that free trial, so you can try it before you buy it. Although, honestly, your support as patrons and subscribers is really what helps to keep this thing going. So if you got a few bucks, I certainly would appreciate your help as I'm jamming away here in the podcast/utility closet. Thank you. I love you. Big thanks and appreciation to all of our show sponsors who have brought you this episode here at zero cost. Way to go. You can check your show notes for links and special discounts from those guys that are only available to Struggle listeners, and there's some great discounts there, so check them all out. Actually, you can see all of the show's brand sponsors and special deals by popping over to thestruggleclimbingshow.com/deals. Hey, did you know that The Struggle is carbon neutral in partnership with the Honnold Foundation? Well, you do now, and it feels pretty good for me to write that check every month. They're doing such amazing work to bring clean energy to communities around the world. Y'all can get inspired and learn more about their amazing work over at honnoldfoundation.org, and toss them some love if you can. They're doing awesome stuff. And lastly, The Struggle is a proud member of the Plugtone Audio Collective, a diverse group of the best, most impactful podcasts in the outdoor industry. The show is produced and hosted by me, Ryan Devlin, and edited by the wonderful Glenn Walker. All right, that clips the anchors on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting the show. If you want to do something that helps me out for zero cost, you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, or just share this with one of your climbing friends or the gym that you climb at. It really helps to get the word out there. I appreciate it. I hope your training and climbing are going great, and if you are struggling like me, well, just remember the struggle makes us stronger.